Hey, so I'm sure most of you are well versed or at least generally aware of the life and achievements of Napoleon Bonaparte, and with good reason. He took over most of Europe and probably would have continued to do so if he wasn't stupid and had invaded Russia. Never invade Russia. Ever. However, I would bet my bottom dollar, and for that matter my top dollar, that you are significantly less aware of Napoleon's 2, 3, and 4. So let's rectify that situation, shall we? To start with, Napoleon II's full name, and pardon my French here literally, was Napoleon Francois Joseph Charles Napoleon Bonaparte. Kind of a mouthful. He was the Duke of Reichstadt, and from birth the King of Rome. When you think about it, Rome was probably a pretty inefficient city at the time with a baby ruler, because it's hard to get anything done in a city where everyone has to play tag for 3 hours a day. So in 1815, Napoleon II's dad, Napoleon I, abdicated the throne after his horrific loss at the Battle of Waterloo, and legally Napoleon II became Emperor of the French at 4 years old. So the French people weren't exactly thrilled with Napoleon I at the time, since he had just abdicated and lost the Battle of Waterloo, and they weren't exactly looking for Napoleon II to take the throne since he was still in diapers, so a commission took control of France for 2 weeks, never summoned Napoleon II, and started a new government in France called the Second French Republic. Thus pretty effectively ending Napoleon II's theoretical rule of France, and he lived out the rest of his life as a duke in Austria. He may have also been the illegitimate father of Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico, but that's a story for another time. Moving on to the big one, Napoleon III, otherwise known as Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, or as the French would say, Louis Napoleon, which is much more fun to say. So the Second French Republic is in full swing at this point, and Napoleon III, seen here showing off how he single-handedly caused the extinction of every single animal with white fur in France, has decided to run for president. And run for president he does, receiving 92% of the vote. To put that in perspective, that would be if every single state in the United States voted for the same candidate except for Texas. That's intense. So Louis Napoleon is an immensely popular president. However, he doesn't exactly play nice with the National Assembly, and because of that, they won't amend the Constitution to allow him to run for a second presidential term. And as such, he's like, screw the presidency, stages a coup d'etat, and establishes himself as emperor. However, like Napoleon I before him, Napoleon III asked the public to validate his actions, and validate him they do. 97% of the public votes for Napoleon III to be the hereditary emperor of France. To put this in perspective, this would be like if every single person in the United States voted for the same candidate except for like your grandma. So Napoleon III does a lot of really cool things for an emperor. He champions the problems of the poor, giving them for the first time the right to strike, which is actually fairly huge, and he goes through major renovations of Paris. And major renovations he made. Paris, like a lot of cities in Europe, had started out as a medieval town that had just sort of expanded outward as it grew, and as such made absolutely no sense. The inner city was entirely slums, the roads made no sense, buildings were hanging out over things, it was a bloody mess. So Napoleon, seeing that they needed straight roads for the new electric car and all that sort of thing, cut basically straight lines for wide open avenues through Paris, and essentially made Paris the well-planned and beautiful city that it is today. Unfortunately, Napoleon III had the same weakness as his uncle Napoleon I in that he was really into military adventurism, and as such put France in a lot of wars. And this earned him a lot of really harsh criticism from some really awesome people. For instance, Victor Hugo wrote a pamphlet calling him Napoleon the Small in comparison to his uncle, which is ironic considering his uncle's perceived height. Karl Marx also had a good one where he said about Napoleon III, Hegel remarks that all great world historical facts and personages appear, so to speak, twice. The first time in tragedy, the second time in farce. Dang, Karl Marx can hit. And it turned out those guys were right, at least in part, because Napoleon III did overstep himself militarily in the Franco-Prussian War, losing big time and himself becoming captured at the Battle of Sedan, thus beginning the Third French Republic, and he lived out the rest of his life in exile in the UK. Poor Napoleon III. Napoleon IV, the only son of Napoleon III, was also exiled to the UK, where he joined the British Army and died in a battle in Africa, thus ending any chance the Bonapartes ever had of returning to the throne of France. However, despite the break in direct lineage, the House Bonaparte still lives on today, and there is technically a successor to the Napoleonic throne. Jean-Christophe is the current heir to the Napoleonic throne, and claims to be the rightful emperor of France. We'll see how well that works out for you, Jean-Christophe. Good luck, though. And that concludes our lesson on the Napoleons. There will be a test next week, and I will see you all tomorrow.
I said, what about breakfast at Tiffany's? She said, I think I remember the film, and as I recall, I think we both kinda liked it. And I said, well, that's the one thing we got. Take it away, greatness. Broken.